The next one is ejection seats. This is just a nice little thing. It'd be lovely to see some ejection seats in the game. Hopefully at some point, as we go more modern, with aviation, which I definitely think is going to happen this year, it would be really, really nice just to see, just more little things like ejection seats, which just add a little bit to the experience. They wouldn't add anything to the gameplay. They'd just look cool. That's basically it. And now some of the larger ideas. So the first one would be how in ground forces they reduced the parts in the FPE grind, so it was a lot easier to get those modifications. Do you know which mode does not get this? That's right, Naval. Naval does not get access to these ideas. Naval does not have a system where its parts and FPE gets lowered. Instead, it stays the same cost as all the other modules. In my opinion, this should be changed, so at least it mimics the ground system, so therefore it is cheaper to be able to get those key modifications. Another way that I would personally change it, not just for Naval, but also for aviation and also for ground, is I would be able to let the player pick the key modifications that they would want to be reduced in RP. Because one of the things, at least for me, personally, is there's a lot of modifications that are very key, but they are still crazy expensive, whereas I think they're actually more key than parts and or FPE. So stuff like thermals, stuff like the ammunition, meta ammunition choice, such as the engine, bomber bomb loads, things like these. It would be much better if there was a system set up in the game where you could choose, at least of, let's say, rank 5 vehicles and above, you could choose which modifications are reduced in cost. And even if this increased the other modifications, of those tiers, in general RP, I would be completely fine with that. So you would take away the reductions on stuff like parts and FPE and give the player a choice of 2 to 3 modifications that they can personally reduce, therefore making their personal grind easier and, basically picking it towards whatever they feel is correct instead of what, the game thinks is correct, which is, of course, the parts and FPE change. So yeah, that would be something I would do. Put the onus on the player to decide what they think is important and then move from there. I generally think that's the way to go. Another way you could do it is, in the Warbond shop, you could have a box which gave out a free modification for a vehicle of your choice. It could give you a random modification, or it could give you a modification that you've picked, and this functionality already exists in the form of the random box that you sometimes get after battles. Sometimes you just get a random modification for a vehicle as you're grinding it, so that already exists. You could just expand the system so it's more involved with the Warbond shop, and all of these ideas are catered towards making the stock versus spaded experience a little bit closer together, because over this last year there has been a massive push to make stock vehicles a lot harder to use compared to spaded ones, and I can only see that as a negative change for the general player. So I would like that to be at least readdressed. Another thing would be an add-on to, the Battle Pass, but what I would call it is the Thunder Pass. And basically what the Thunder Pass would be is a monthly thing, probably similar to the Warbond shop, where basically you pay an amount of GE and then you get access to challenges to unlock skins. It's as simple as that. So once again, taking something from the Thunder League but making it more of a monthly event, because I think the Thunder League challenges at least showed us a really cool idea and a set of ideals which were pretty awesome for the game, and more stuff which is more content that keeps people playing the game either on a daily or monthly basis is obviously what Gaijin are heading for. That's what they're looking for. That's why they do updates all the time. That's why the battle pass is a thing. That's why they have these events at specific times of the year. It's all geared around player retention and also getting new players into the game. So this would be another thing which basically you could grind as you're playing with these specific vehicles, to get the skins which are available. So the idea would be at the start of the month, you would pay XG, whether it's like, I don't know, 500, 1,000, 5,000, whatever it is, right? And you would get access to the challenges, and in that month, it would be, let's say, challenges for 5 separate vehicles, and you had to get, I don't know, 50 kills with each vehicle, or maybe 20 kills with each vehicle, and this would mean, or maybe 20 assists, depending on the vehicle, or maybe 20 tons of bombs dropped, or something like that. And if you complete those challenges, then you get those skins, which are on offer in what we would deem as the Thunder Pass. And I think this would be a nice little thing. I think it would be really nice to see, and hopefully at some point we do get more of this, let's call it player retention content, which goes around. And obviously you would have an option where you could just buy the challenges straight out. That is just kind of a standard thing when it comes to these style of games, so I wouldn't be opposed to that at all. The next one would be an expansion of howitzer and large caliber vehicles. One of the things which has been nice to see over, the last year or so, there has been a push for, some very high tier artillery vehicles, SPHs. I'm not really a fan of them, if I'm honest with you, mainly because I know what's going to happen. I already know what's going to happen because it's already been happening over the last year or so. The Type 75 SPH got added, and everybody and their mother has decided to tell me about how it would be really cool to have a top-down system for artillery. No, it is one of the worst mechanics in World of Tanks. Stop trying to bring it here. Same with all of you guys who play World of Warships and you want to bring in the carriers. No. Alright? How about no? Let's not take the stuff which has been impossible to balance for those games and bring it to War Thunder. Thank you. Go and play them in those games, and then wonder why people complain about them. Now, when I'm talking about howitzer or large caliber vehicles, I'm not talking about the, stuff like the very modern systems. What I'm talking about is the Churchill with the 95, the Centaur with the 95, stuff like the Bishop, the Sexton, the Yaramba with the 25-pounder. All of these machines, I feel, would be very fun to use and would just give a little bit of difference when it comes to gameplay, and would be at least more useful than some of the tank destroyers that are around the place. And it's kind of weird how we haven't seen stuff like the 95mm for the British yet. It was, a gun that was heavily used in World War II. Yes, it was mainly used as an infantry support gun, but at the same time it did have access to rounds, which would be useful against other vehicles. And also, it would just be really nice to see the Centaur in game. It's very similar to the Cromwell, it just has a different engine, and it's just, you basically have a set of 3 vehicles. You have the Cavalier, the Centaur, and the Cromwell. And I feel like the Cavalier and the Centaur are never going to get into the game because we already have the Cromwell, and that would be kind of sad because the Centaur and the Cavalier should also be represented as part of the Second World War's history. So yeah, that's how I would bring them in as general vehicles. So hopefully we get the 95mm at some point. Hopefully the 25-pounder can also grace us in the form of an artillery unit. That would be lovely to see too. And then another thing, it would just be nice to see more 1920s and 1930s aircraft. There's a lot of really cool designs when it comes to 1920s and 1930s aircraft. One of the major issues that One of the major issues about these things is monetization. Like, how do you bring them in and actually, make them monetized, so therefore it's worth Gaijin's time? But generally, I mean, you could maybe do like a like an expansion pass thing, I suppose, of them. But it's something that I've struggled with quite a lot when it comes to these ideas. How to be able to monetize them. But just from a selfish point of view, I just really like the general designs of the 1920s, the 1930s, and even the First World War when it comes to aircraft. I think when it comes to tanks for the First World War, there is a general issue where they're not really designed to fight each other, and also they're very limited when it comes to which nations would have them. But I definitely think when it comes to planes, you could definitely have a good setup of this. You could have a good set of stuff, which would be pretty fun. If you wanted to do like tanks from the First World War, I think what you do is you do them as collectibles. And this is another idea, which would be once again based around the hangar. So the hangar that we have implemented now, it has a bunch of different areas of it. What if you were able to swap out slightly different areas of it with customizational things? So there is, let's say in the ground hangar, which there is a vehicle which is covered in like a tarpaulin. What if you could do specific events and you could get models of vehicles and be able to replace that vehicle which is covered with another vehicle? What if you could change the vehicles which are on the firing line? What if you could change the vehicles which are going past you on the road? What if you could change the individuals who are sat around, the mechanics? What if you could change their uniforms? What if you could, change the general aesthetic? Maybe you could make it more World War II or modern day. Maybe you could change the pictures which are sat around. Maybe you could change the trees. Maybe you could add some different things to it. There's all these things that could definitely be done with the customization of the hangar, which could be linked to challenges or could be linked to GE, could be linked to pretty much anything. But one of those things would be, as I said, bringing in certain decorations. And one of them which would be really cool to see is on the anniversary of the first tank battle, which was basically the Battle of Villers-Bretonneux. It was the first engagement where it was German tanks versus British tanks, and it was, not a great battle. Basically, on the British side, you had a bunch of Mark IV tanks, which were around at the time, which were introduced in 1917, and then on the German side, you had A7Vs, which were also introduced in 1917. So you could have like an event which goes on for like a week or a month, and basically you have to play like 10 games in that event, or you have to win 5 games, or you have to win 20 games, doesn't matter, win X amount of games or play X amount of games, and you play these vehicles in something like Villa Bocage, which is, a custom mission that we have in the game. It's very similar to the area of Villa Bretonneux, and basically, you just play it, and if you play it enough, then you get access to have these vehicles in your hangar. You wouldn't be able to take them into battles for obvious reasons. They wouldn't be very useful, and they would just get annihilated. But as like decorations or as customization options for the hangar, I think that would be a really cool addition to the game. The next one would be FLDC mechanics. So if you didn't know, you have a lot of airfield DC mechanics, which already exist. Stuff such as the modular airfields, which are pretty cool. The battle line would be nice to see as well, especially in Aerialistic, the way that it works now, just to see who's winning, who is losing, give more of a visual representation. But yeah, the modular airfields would be really cool. You could even do modular bases with the 3 areas of supply, production, and transport. So if the supply area is still alive, then, it can supply the airfields if they get taken out, therefore they can, resupply them. If the production area is taken out, then there's no supply, and if the transport area is taken out, then you're creating supply, but you're not sending it to the airfield. I think generally this would be a pretty cool little idea. I've talked about it in the past a few years ago. I might do an updated video on it, since, that video is pretty old now, and I have a few new ideas, but the general idea is to compound compartmentalize a bunch of the mechanics when it comes to Air RB and Air AB and Air EC, and put them all into each of the game modes, so therefore we can expand the general use of them. Then the next one is the expansion of new aerialistic maps into all the older ones. So if you didn't know, a few updates ago, maybe 3 updates ago now, they started adding this new style of aerialistic map. It basically is you have a massive fight in the center of the map, and in the center of the map, you have a bunch of light targets, a bunch of heavy targets. You have a bunch of basically everything for anybody to be able to destroy. And what this has added is a way for planes to be able to win the match, not just by killing the whole of the enemy, but also by annihilating, all of the tickets and stuff like that. And I generally think this is a positive change, and it means that you have more agency on what goes on to the in the battle. You don't always have to play like the PvP if you don't want to. There's now way more decisions that you have to make as an individual because of these new style of maps, where before you were limited to either go after planes or go after specific AIs or go after specific airfields or bases. Now it's a little bit less. Now it's definitely a little bit less on the old. There's more agency for the player, basically, is the way to put it. So I would love to see those new systems added to all the other maps that we have in the game. So therefore, first of all, standardize them, but also at the same time, it would get rid of some of the massive imbalances that exist, such as on the some of the Pacific maps and also on Hokkaido itself. Then it would be nice if we had more armored cars, of course. More armored cars, we had a decent amount of wheeled vehicles which were added this year, and we also had a decent amount of armored cars. The BA-11 was added, which was pretty cool, and then also a bunch of other ones. But I still think it would be nice to see a few more of these in general. And then also, the First World War stuff, we've already had a few of the naval aspects added. I still think World War I planes would be really cool, but more of the naval aspects for World War I could work as well. And also, one of the ideas that I would love to see, which I've talked about for many years now, is the idea of not having annihilated maps. We have the Swedish map, but there are inherent issues with the Swedish map, which would be nice to see solved. The 2 major issues is the frame rate when you're in the air. It's really bad, really, really bad. And the other one as well is the sound. The sound on the map is just completely balked. I don't know how else to put it. It just doesn't really work in general how you would generally want it to work. You can hear people from 2 to 3 streets away, and it gets very confusing, and it makes it very easy to camp. So for me, I really like Sweden as a map, but those 2 issues need to be solved. And also, I would like more maps like that. Instead of just having a destroyed Berlin, that we have, why not have a 1930s Berlin, which isn't bombed to hell? Why not have a 1920s London? Why not have a 1950s, a 1950s real Madrid? That would be cool to see. And the fact that we have like Alaska, which I believe is out of the rotation now, at least it is on the rotation filter, and now we have stuff like Sweden. It's nice to see that that's happening, and I would like to see more. Also, paratrooper mechanics in Aerialistic and Air Arcade, I think they would add a lot to the game. I've done a bunch of videos in the past about how they would work, the general path lines that they would take and the general ideas that would form in them. I think generally Paratroopers would just add a new dynamic to the game. AI Paratroopers, of course. And the basic idea would be the planes get sent in, you don't know where they're coming from, but they'll come from designated general paths. You could test it in Air EC first. But they come in, they drop the troops off. If you destroy them before they drop the troops off, therefore, you get the enemy team loses tickets. If the paratroopers get dropped off into a basic area, then it takes that basic area and your team loses tickets, but then you have the ability to have, like, let's say after 2 to 3 minutes you'll have a counterattack event, and therefore you'll have to destroy all the AI in that area, and if you destroy all that AI in that area, therefore the enemy team loses tickets, and you could do stuff like that. So I think it would work incredibly well, and it would be really nice to see just more of these mechanics to make War Thunder not just a PvP game, but also a PvE game as well, with PvP elements. I always like the idea of being part of a bigger picture in War Thunder, not just being the center of attention, but being a cog in the machine instead of the machine itself, and that would be one of those things to add in. Then, obviously, the introduction of a long-form Build-A-Bear event, just from a selfish point of view. Obviously, with the Twitch drops that were going on, it's created a lot of artificial viewership, which is good and is bad. It's a way that you can, bump up numbers, but also it doesn't really give you anything over time. It doesn't, really help out too much. But if you increase those events to be more long form, then obviously it will generally hopefully increase general retention. But the main issue is when it comes to those events is the amount of money that Gaijin has to invest in them, and this would need a whole new system. So basically, you get a blueprint in the game, or you get a blueprint as a Twitch drop, and then what you would do is you would get drops of the components of those vehicles. Then you could either sell them on the Gaijin market, or you could keep them and build the vehicle and sell all the duplicates that you get. And the general idea would be you just watch Twitch channels to get all the drops, and then eventually you can put together these vehicles and you get the vehicles. Simple as that. But as I said, the monetary incentive is very low for Gaijin unless they make the parts couponable, which I think they should, therefore they can share them on the market. The next one is the new Squadron Vehicles. It's always nice to get more Squadron Vehicles. The addition of the A4E early and also the Shimakaze was really nice to see, and it would just be nice to see more. You can make the Covenanter one, you can make the Centaur one, as I said before. I would personally like to see one vehicle every update dedicated to being a squadron vehicle. Even if you have all the plans for one update, just take one of those vehicles out, or one of the variants of the vehicles out, make it a squadron vehicle, done. Simple as that. It would be nice to see. And then also just more additions to the Warbond shop would always be nice. One of the things I would like to see, since now we have this elongated system for the Warbond shop, is the way it used to work before on a month-by-month basis is, so for the Warbond shop, there was these two boxes that would rotate with each other. So you had the helmet box, and then you had the decoration box. Basically, every month they would switch. So you would have the helmets one week, 1 month, and then you would have the decorations the next. I would much prefer it if they were both in the same Warbond shop, now that we have this extended Warbond shop over time. I think that would generally be pretty nice to see. Hopefully at some point that would be good. And also, at the same time, parity. We've talked about this a lot before. Parity has definitely been increased this year with a lot of, high-tier additions, with a lot of naval additions, a lot of helicopter additions, and it's been quite nice. But still, a hope would be, helicopter tech trees for every nation, naval tech trees for every nation, just so we can get parity between the nations that we already have in game without thinking of any other nations that would be added. And on the topic of other nations being added, sub-tech trees. This is a thing that I talked about basically at the start of the year, is how to implement minor nations. Basically, you implement them just like you have helicopters in the game, where they will be attached to specific nations, and once they're attached to specific nations, Basically, when you hit a certain rank of that specific nation, then you end up unlocking that tech tree, and then you can mix and match the vehicles from that tech tree with the vehicles of the major nation. And the only way you can research the minor nations tech tree stuff is if you use the minor nation's vehicles. But the reason why you attach it to the major nation tech tree is so you will always have lineups around those vehicles, so therefore it's a little bit easier to do. So this could apply to pretty much any country in the game. You know, the only issue is working out which nation to attach it to, and this would get rid of the issue that a lot of nations have, such as Japan and Sweden, which would be the fact that they don't have lineups at specific BRs, and this really hampers them when it comes to people actually playing them. I think it would be much better to do this system with any new nation which comes to the game, and therefore we could add a lot more smaller tech trees if required, and then build upon them for specific nations, and therefore more people can get their national vehicles represented in the game without the needed hassle of having to be independent tech trees. And the people who want only independent tech trees, just all you have to say to them, it's either we do it this way or we don't do it at all because you don't have enough vehicles. And then you can let them scream, you can let them dance, you can let them prance, and then they can enjoy their vehicles anyway. That's the way I would personally do it. And the last thing would be maps with different weather conditions. I would really like to see certain maps with different weather. I think we've had a little bit of a change on that. You know, we've had a lot of rain and a lot of cloud with certain things, but why can't we have like a winter version of Ash River? Why can't we have a summer version of Finland? Why can't we have a spring version of something like Wallonia instead of an autumn version? I would love to see different weather conditions on the same maps, because this just adds more to the maps themselves. It just adds different playstyles based on what weather they have. And this means that a map such as Surroundings of Volkolamsk could come back, because in the summer, the Surroundings of Volkolamsk would be a lot more fun to play, because you wouldn't just get stuck in snow all the time, and also, it would be a lot harder to be able to see across the place, and you wouldn't just be spotted. Well, I suppose with thermals you would, but with everything else it wouldn't be too bad. But yeah, it would be nice to see variable weather conditions. I think that, to me, would just add a lot more to the maps. And as one point, we've only had one ground map added this year. We've only had Sweden added this year. There hasn't been another ground map added to this year. So I suppose for 2021, it would also be nice to see a few more ground maps, or a few more variations of maps, and not just little map changes like changing a rock by a meter. Instead, having actual proper changes. Oh yeah, and rework Karelia, would you? That would be really nice. It's a terrible map, easily the worst in the game. Make sure to fix it. Now, these were the hopes of 2021. A lot of stuff, a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting ideas. If you have any, please make sure to stick them in the comments, so I can have a read and have a look, and it would be lovely, to see, what you are interested in or what you would like the game to do. And as usual, I hope you have a really good new year. I'm feeling really positive about this one. It's going to be a good one. And hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. I'd just like to thank John Ryman, Universe, Conte Baraka, Elove Goat, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez B. Young, and also Hans Fagellen, Sebastian Mizon, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.